Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to tonight's webinar. My name is Brendan Gray. I'm a social worker and practice manager. I work in the northwest of England, and I'm here tonight to talk about safeguarding children from referral to response. So the aim of tonight's presentation and webinar is to determine what is meant by safeguarding children, have a whistle-stop tour of some common signs and symptoms of possible abuse, what you should do if you have a concern about a child, and we'll take a look at the referral process and possible outcomes following your referral. So firstly, safeguarding children can be described as protecting children from maltreatment, preventing impairment of children's health or development, ensuring that children grow up in circumstances consistent with the provision of safe and effective care, and us as professionals taking action to enable all children have the best outcomes. Now, this isn't just the responsibility of social workers or social care professionals, it's a responsibility of all staff and professionals working in universal and emergency services. We all have a key role to play in safeguarding. It is the social worker's role, obviously, to undertake a social care assessment, but it's informed by multi-agency professionals. No single professional can have a full picture of a child's needs and circumstances. For example, I'm a social worker, I don't have a clue about health and the health needs of children. I have a basic understanding, but health professionals inform my assessment of the health and social needs of a child. Similarly, I don't have an understanding of educational needs. Again, I have a brief understanding, but I rely on teachers and teaching assistants, for example, to help me understand the needs of children with regards to education. So every professional that comes into contact with children has a role to play, and that role includes identifying any concerns, sharing information, and taking any prompt action. Just jump forward a bit. So we'll have a look at what abuse may look like, but it's important to note here that this is a list of signs and symptoms which are possible indicators of abuse. It doesn't mean to say that it's definitely abuse occurring if any of these signs or symptoms are present. They do not necessarily indicate that a child's been abused, but it's something that professionals can use to recognise if something is wrong and if we need to look at it further, make further inquiries. Physical abuse may involve hitting, shaking, throwing, poisoning, burning, scalding, drowning, suffocating, or otherwise causing any kind of physical harm towards a child or a young person. Now, you may have listened to me previously talk about fabricated induced illness, and again, we can include that in this category of physical abuse. When a child presents to a health professional, I've just put up on screen a little diagram there of possible non-accidental injury. So these are injuries which occur on a child which should prompt the health professional to query the mechanism of injury and perhaps make a referral to children's social care. Starting from the top, we've got ears, which especially pinch marks involving both sides of the ears. If a child was to get an injury, it's likely that it would only occur on one side. So if we've got injury to both sides of the ears, concern should be raised. Particularly around the triangle of safety as well, the ears, the side of the face, and neck and top of shoulders. Injuries rarely occur in that area. We have shoulder blades that protect us, and our head usually protects from injury to those areas. The inner aspects of arms, for example, if there's grab marks under the inner arm, the back, side, and trunk, except when directly over the bony spine. So bruising to the spine may occur because it's a bony area. However, if we look at the back and the side of a child's trunk and there's injury there, we should perhaps explore the mechanism of injury. Black eyes returning to the head, especially if bilateral. If a child gets an injury to the face, it's normally the nose that's hit first, and usually that results in two black eyes. The soft tissues to the cheek, which are extremely difficult to bruise without trauma. Any intraoral injuries, such as a torn frenulum, would require further exploration of how that occurred. The forearms, particularly if there's injury to suggest that a child's raised to protect themselves. Any injury to the chest or abdomen, for example, your arms are usually there and able to protect from any injury to that area. Any injuries to the groin or genital region or inside the inner thighs, particularly around that region, would need further exploration as to how that injury occurred. And finally, to the soles of the feet. Now, non-accidental injury can occur at any part of the body. Injury can be seen, so it doesn't rule out that an abusing parent may injure somebody to the shins of the legs, but what should be pointers towards further exploration, further inquiries, and perhaps a referral to children's social care should be injuries to both sides of the body, injuries to soft tissue, injuries with a particular pattern. For example, I once worked with a family whereby an iron was used to produce a burn on a child. So if you can see a particular pattern, then definitely referral to children's social care. Any injury that doesn't fit the explanation, so if a parent gives an explanation of how the injury occurred and you fit belief at the time that it doesn't quite fit the presentation of the injury, then again we need to be seeking an explanation. Any delays in presentation and any untreated injuries will require further exploration and consideration of a referral to children's social care. And we'll just look at this creepy girl on a bike, because what we need to remember is that children get injured and children have accidents. It's part of life, it's part of a child exploring their environment. So common sites for injury to children, which are usually explainable and usually accountable by the parents, are the nose, the forehead, elbows, spine, chin, forearm, hips, and particularly the shins. Children will bang the shins. If any of these injuries occur in non-mobile children, so that's children who are babies, infants, then we need to look at considering non-accidental injury, seeking further exploration, and potentially a referral to children's social care. Just jumping forward again, sorry. The next category of abuse to look at is neglect. Now, neglect is extremely difficult category in that it's extremely subjective. It's not like an injury. One person's dirty house isn't potentially a social worker's dirty house, but neglect for the meaning of abuse is a persistent failure to meet a child's basic physical and or psychological needs, and it's likely to result in a serious impairment of the child's health or development. Now, neglect can occur before a child's born, for example, as a result of maternal substance misuse. So if you're working with a parent that's misusing substances and they disclose they're pregnant, then potentially a referral should be made immediately to children's social care. Once a child is born, neglect can involve a parent or carer failing to provide adequate food, clothing, shelter, and exclusion from the home or abandonment. Now, if we think back to Maslow's hierarchy of need, and our most basic need is appropriate food, clothing and shelter, failure to provide any of those will prevent the child progressing through the needs to live a successful adult life. Neglect can include not protecting a child from the physical and emotional harm of danger, and that can be from, for example, through a child witnessing domestic violence, being around adults who are inappropriate, involved in crime, involved in violence. Neglect can also include ensuring that the children or child is adequately supervised, and including the use of inadequate caregivers, that they do not have access to appropriate medical care or treatment. So we look and we see children whose dental hygiene, for example, is neglected, or they fail to present for their developmental checks. They may fail to present for their immunisations, and this can all come under the category of neglect. Neglect can also include the unresponsiveness to a child's emotional needs. So a child crying and without any response, a child who's constantly berated, a child that's sworn at, it can neglect, covers the not being able to meet the emotional needs that most parents would offer a child. This brings us on to emotional abuse, and that's a feature of abuse which includes putting inappropriate expectations on a child. It includes interactions and relations that are beyond the child's developmental capacity. It includes overprotection, limitation of exploration or learning. It may involve seeing or hearing the ill treatment of another, can involve bullying. It's about making the child feel frightened or in danger of their environment, and it can include the exploitation or corruption of children. Some level of emotional abuse is involved in all types of child abuse, though it may occur alone. Possible indicators of emotional abuse. Now, emotional abuse is extremely difficult for a social worker to pinpoint exactly as a form of abuse, and the reason for that is social workers, and like any other professional, aren't present in the home 24/7, and it's likely the behaviour towards a child is going to be extremely different when a professional is around than when at home and no professionals around and the family is alone. But some possible indicators of emotional abuse are failure to grow or thrive, particularly if the child thrives away from home. So it may be the case that a child's removed from a family, and whilst in foster care they thrive. They may suddenly develop speech disorders and may, in the educational arena, display a developmental delay, which can either be physical or emotional. Now, in respect of the behaviour, they may start displaying compulsive nervous behaviours such as hair twisting or rocking, an unwillingness or inability to play. They may have excessive fear of making mistakes. They may start self-harm or mutilation. They may show an excessive lack of confidence and the constant need for approval, attention and praise, but when given that praise, display an inability to cope with it. The final category of abuse that I'm going to discuss is sexual abuse. Now, sexual abuse involves forcing or enticing a child to take part in a sexual activity. Now, this can involve physical contact. So by physical contact, I mean assault by penetration, which can be rape or oral. We then have non-penetrative acts such as masturbation, kissing, rubbing, touching, and outside of clothing. Then we have non-contact activities such as involving children looking at or in the production of sexual images. Perpetrators can cause sexual abuse by asking a child to watch sexual activities, encouraging children to behave in sexually inappropriate ways, or grooming, particularly via the internet these days, a child in preparation for any sexual abuse. Now, it's important to note here that it's not solely perpetrated by males. Women can also commit acts of sexual abuse, as can other children. It may be a case that the local authority children's social care receives a referral that it's actually child-on-child sexual abuse. Now, some of this could be exploration as a child develops. However, it also could be that the child who's the perpetrating child has been encouraged by an adult to perform sexual abuse, physical contact on another child. Some possible indicators of sexual abuse. Again, this isn't an exhaustive list and this isn't a definite list. These indicators, both physical and behavioural, can appear through other reasons, through the explanatory reasons which aren't abusive in themselves. But some physical indicators of sexual abuse include pain, itching, bruising or bleeding in the genital or anal areas, any sexual transmitted infection, recurrent genital discharge or urinary tract infections without apparent cause, stomach pains, discomfort when child is walking or sitting down, and in older children, pregnancy. Some behavioural indicators of sexual abuse include sudden unexplained changes in behaviour, apparent fear of somebody, being sexually coercive with other children, nightmares or bedwetting, self-harm, self-mutilation, suicide attempts, drugs, alcohol, eating problems, sexualised behaviour or knowledge, drawings or language, and running away from home. It is my suggestion that should any of the physical indicators be present, that a discussion takes place immediately with the paediatric consultant, and should you see any of the behavioural indicators in the presence of physical indicators, then yes, advice should be sought from the designated lead for safeguarding, and potentially an immediate referral to children's social care. Other concerning factors in respect of safeguarding children is a parent or child that's misusing alcohol. I've underlined there domestic violence and abuse within the household, because there's a plethora of research now that suggests that children witnessing domestic violence are extremely impacted negatively as they become adults. Parents with learning difficulties and mental health problems. Now, I must be very clear here, not every parent with a learning difficulty or mental health problem is an abusing parent, but it can make bringing up a child extremely difficult, and it can contribute to abusive behaviour towards a child. Not in every case, however. Another concerning factor is children with disabilities who are unable to disclose disputes, and children that suffer mental health difficulties. We're moving into an era now of online grooming and sexual exploitation. We're concerned with teenage pregnancy and parenthood, horribly child trafficking, which is becoming more prevalent in this country, highly mobile families and families without recourse to public funds. For example, this would be families that unfortunately are trafficked into the country that don't have recourse to public funds. Bullying, we're seeing an increase in bullying, including online, where children aren't able to escape the abuse. Female genital mutilation, self-harming behaviours, and radicalisation. All of these factors can present in isolation, or there can be numerous factors involved in the abuse of a child, so they can coexist, or as I say, exist in isolation. So, when do we make a referral? The million-dollar question. What I'd like you to consider first is the continuum of need. Okay. The continuum of need has been developed for professionals to understand when social care should be intervening with family life and when universal services are there to support the family. So we'll start from left to right, and level 1 is universal. So this is where children or young people, their needs can be met by universal services, and they're usually thriving. So a universal response may be a child that's not always presented to routine dental appointments. So a level 1 universal response may be the school nurse or the health visitor supporting parents to attend appointments. Moving on to an early support response, which is level 2 and in green. This is families or children who are just coping and they may be in need of early support. So this may be referring a child or family to the local children's centre for support with parenting, understanding boundaries, guidance, and the basic needs of children. So a level 2 additional support needs could be met, as I say, by a children's centre. Similarly, they could be met by the health visitor or school nurse supporting the family to understand the health needs of a child. Now you'll see in the middle a section that says use CAF. Now the CAF is a common assessment framework, and that's available for all professionals. If you Google CAF or type common assessment framework, you'll see an assessment pro forma which will take most professionals through the needs of a child, and that will help the professional identify the appropriate response. Moving on to levels 3 and 4. Now level 3 is complex support needs, and this is a targeted early support response. So this is where the professional sees children, people, and families struggling to cope, and it needs a coordinated, targeted response. Now at this level, this could be delivered by using the CAF or using what the meetings, which would be team around the child. but it can include a response from children's social care at a child in need level. Now the final level, which is level 4, is intensive needs. Now if you come across a child in this category or family that are not coping and are likely to need a response from a specialist service, this is where we should definitely be referring to children's social care. This is where children and families need coordination of specialist services, often directly commissioned by social care or provided by universal services. And this will be where the local authority has a statutory response, so that's a legal response to children who are in this category. I recommend that any professional, if they come across a child at level 3 or level 4 on the continuum of need, refers directly to children's social care. I've highlighted there the 4 levels. So level 1 would be children with no additional needs. Level 2, children with additional needs showing early signs of vulnerability. Level 3, children in need who require a statutory or specialist service. And level 4, children who are suffering or likely to suffer significant harm. We'll return to significant harm in a bit. So as I say, level 3 and 4 on the continuum of need, including emergency safeguarding. So if you're a paramedic and you go out and a child needs emergency safeguarding, a referral needs making immediately to children's social care. If in any doubt whatsoever, most services have a designated lead for safeguarding, and of course you can always contact children's social care to discuss your concerns. When considering a referral, the child, and this is enshrined in policy and legislation, the needs of the child should always come first. So regardless of a parent saying, I hit him because I'm struggling, it's not that the parent was struggling, it's the child that's been hit. So sometimes, however, it's not appropriate to share your concerns with parents, as this could place a child at further risk, particularly in cases of suspected sexual abuse, fabricated or induced illness, or female genital mutilation. Lots of people ask, should I get consent? Well, my first answer is yes. You should always get consent from a parent unless it's going to place a child at risk. If it's going to place a child at risk by a parent agreeing to your sharing of information, then share the information with children's social care and provide a rationale for why you didn't get consent. And more than likely that's that at the time, you believe that the child would be placed at further risk. If you do believe a child is suffering from significant harm, you do not have to get consent to share information. When making a referral, we need to record the facts, and I've underlined facts because this can't be fanciful speculation. It needs to be facts of the case, objective facts of the case, and this needs to be done as soon as possible. Your facts need to include the concern about the child, the details of what you observed, what you heard, and I've put there what you smelt. If the house smelt of urine, say the house smelt of urine. Use the child's words, do not interpret. Quote directly what the child said to you. Note down any discussions with parents or carers. Note the context, and by that it may be the context might be that you were called out as an emergency ambulance, you attended the address, this is the third time that it happened, you know the school nurse is involved. So what has been done previously and any other professionals that you're aware of who are involved. Say how you interpret the facts and not any decisions. So it's all very well writing a story, let's say, of the case as it presents to you, but what did you do? How did you feel? What did you believe was happening at the time? And always use plain language, and if possible, type up your recording. Now, I'm going to discuss a perfect referral. Now, a perfect referral is not going to always happen. It's extremely difficult. I understand the pressures on all professionals to refer to children's social care, that they want it done as quickly as possible. However, a perfect referral will include full names of the children, their date of birth and the gender, of all the children in the household. So although you may only be attending to one or working with one child, it's really important to address all of the children in the household, because what is happening to one child is likely to be impacting on the other children. We definitely need the family address, where relevant, any schools or nursery attend. The identity of those with parental responsibility. So children that you go to may be living outside of the family home, they may be living in foster care, they may be living with an aunt, uncle, gran, whoever. But it's important that we try and ascertain who has parental responsibility for the children. If possible, and again this is perfect referral, names and date of birth of all the household members. It's really important for social care assessment and any further interactions with the family that we understand who's living in the house, and potentially you providing us a name and date of birth of, let's say, an unknown male. We'll be able to check with police. Children's social care will be able to check with police that unknown male may be a risk to children. We may have information to suggest that unknown male or unknown female is a domestic violence perpetrator. So it's given us some understanding about who's living in that house. Where available, and ideally, we'd request the child's NHS number and the education number, which is a unique pupil number. Obviously, some health professionals won't have access to the education number. However, this enables us to work directly with health visitors, school nurses, GPs, hospitals, particularly where they're asked for the NHS number. Again, a perfect referral will include the ethnicity, the first language and religion of the children or parents, any special needs of the children or parents, and moving on to what's happened, any significant or important historical events or incidents in the child's life that you're aware of. What is the actual cause for concern, including details of any allegations, their sources, the timing and location. It's really important that we know where the child is. Working in an out of hours arena, sometimes we've received referrals from health professionals that parent or carer has been taken to hospital, neighbour decided to look after child or stepped in to look after child, but the paramedic or health professional that attended didn't get the neighbour's address, so we don't actually know where the child is or who's caring for the child. So we need to know the child's current location. We need to know as well, as a professional, whether you believe that child is in need of immediate protection, because our referral response will be completely different depending on whether a child needs support and the family needs support or whether the child needs immediate protection. We need details of who the professional believes is the alleged perpetrator. By details we mean name, date of birth, where they live, and we need an understanding of the relationship and knowledge of the referrer with the child and parents, whether there's any other agency involved, and information whether the parent has knowledge of the referral to children's social care, has agreed to the referral, and is willing to work with children's social care. Again, any child that you believe is in need of immediate protection, consent and agreement to sharing information doesn't need to be gathered. It's really important as well if the child's views and wishes are known, and again it's coming back to the child being paramount in all of this, that they're recorded within the referral. When talking to the children, we'll just cover this briefly, it's important that we remain calm, we take what the child says seriously, we listen carefully without interrupting or prompting, we let them know that they're not to blame, that they're not going to get into trouble, we let them know what we're going to do to help, we make sure that we contact the relevant emergency service, be that out of hours, the emergency duty team or social services, or whether we need to contact police. We report what we've been told to the designated child protection officer, and again we very clearly record what was said, who was present, and ideally quote the child. What we're not going to do, however, is allow your shock or disgust to show. It's extremely difficult when working with particularly high-end instances of abuse, be that sexual abuse or severe physical abuse, to not show shock or disgust when a child tells us what has happened. But it's really important that we take what the child said to us, that we don't reflect any anger, again, or shock or disgust, that we do not probe for more information than what is given. We don't make assumptions, we don't begin criticising the abuser. We certainly don't make promises that we cannot keep. So we don't turn around to children and say, it's okay, I'm going to contact social services, they'll remove you, they'll put you in a house, they'll send you on a round the world cruise, they'll make sure you never come into contact with your parents again. It's really important that we don't make these kind of promises that we cannot keep, because following inquiries, it may be the case that these promises that other professionals are given don't come to fruition, and it undermines the relationship between that profession and the child. We do not agree to keep any information a secret. We advise the child that this is serious information that they're giving us and that it does have to be shared, and the reason that we're sharing it is to protect them. We never delay an emergency action to protect a child, so if you believe a child's at risk, it's no good going home and sleeping on it. It's best to make the referral to your designated child protection officer or children's social care straight away. We never express disbelief in what the child is saying. Sometimes we work with children who fabricate stories or may be lying or may have misinterpreted events, but it's very easy to suddenly present as a disbeliever in what they're saying. So we must never express disbelief in what they're saying, because in future that may prevent the child from disclosing any further abuse. We do not try to investigate or question the child. Now, the children's social care, the trained professionals, the police have trained professionals who will undertake achieving best evidence interviews with children. They're trained to question the child, but to question using open-ended questions, never directly. So the only time that the universal professional, that's somebody outside of social care, should be questioning a child is to clarify what was heard and on what the child actually said. I must note here that it's your professional responsibility to know your agency's referral pathway to children's social care and partner agencies. Children's social care departments across the country have different ways and methods of receiving a referral and professionals making a referral, be that telephone referral, be that electronic referral. But it's really important that as a professional you understand, and it is your professional responsibility to know how to make a referral to children's social care. Very briefly, I just want to mention the Children Act and some legislation around referrals. And the reason that I'm going to mention these is because the way children's social care work with families and children is dependent on different sections of the Children Act. Now, the Children Act comprises child protection legislation, which includes us going to court and potentially taking children into care. But throughout the Children Act, and as I've mentioned throughout this presentation, the welfare of the child is paramount. However, there's a recognition that children should ideally and are best placed to be brought up in their own families. The Children Act also introduced the concept of significant harm and children in need, and conversely permits reasonable physical chastisement of children. It's not illegal to smack children, it's illegal to physically abuse children. There's a fine line between what is appropriate or not appropriate physical chastisement and physical abuse. The Children Act is broken down into sections as per any legislation, but the ones in particular that I'm going to just quickly briefly mention are Section 17. Now, Section 17 are children who are considered in need. Now, the county or the local authority, children's social care, has a duty to assist children in need where their development would be impaired without input. So this would be children, particularly who may present to children's social care on level 3 of the continuum of needs. So where they're failing to live successfully, their needs are not being met and they're in need of specialist or targeted support. Now the second section to concern yourselves with is section 47. Now this is a child protection inquiries section, and this is where the county children's social care has a duty to investigate where a child is considered to be at risk of significant harm. And finally, section 27 is a duty of cooperation between agencies, particularly in instances of child protection. So if you get a social worker ringing up and asking for information about a child, and they say they're undertaking a section 47 inquiry, they want you to be part of a strategy discussion, there is a duty enshrined in the Children's Act for cooperation, so that's a sharing of information. However, if you get the local authority social worker ringing up saying that they're undertaking section 17 assessment or a child in need assessment or planning, requesting for information, it's really important that with working with families, working for the families, that we get consent from the families to share that information. So it's not always a case that we're doling out information left, right and centre and everybody's privy to everybody's information. Section 47 inquiries, however, I mention again, consent is not necessary. The child's needs are paramount, and their paramount need for protection overrules this. As briefly mentioned, the Children Act brought into the equation significant harm, and it's described as the risk of or actual significant harm, which can be the form of a single event or a number of events that interrupt the child's health and development. Now, the risk of or actual significant harm justifies compulsory statutory intervention by the local authority. Now, significant harm is a really difficult term, and it's difficult and made more difficult because what is significant harm? I've briefly described what that can look like, but in practice, when does one dirty house become significant harm and another doesn't? It's quite subjective, dependent on the practitioner. But significant harm regarding section 47 inquiry is that the child is at significant risk. So there's a part of their health or development that's going to be at significant risk if there isn't any intervention from the local authority. Social workers, they don't just have the Children Act to go by. There's numerous acts and numerous policies in respect of protecting children and safeguarding children. I've listed some of them up there on the screen, so it's not just the Children Act that informs our practice. But what I suggest is the go-to policy for practitioners is working together to safeguard children. That's the Department of Health's publication from 2015. It was about in 2010, but the 2015 is the update. It's really easy policy to read, to understand what's going on. It has flow charts, etc. So if you ever faced with a child protection inquiry and you're wondering about acronyms or processes, please have a look at that. It will particularly tell you what your professional responsibilities are. As I briefly mentioned, the reason that we had a quick look there at some of the legislation informing referrals is because they're dealt with completely different when they're made to children's social care. So if a section 17 child in need referral is made to children's social care has a duty to safeguard and promote the welfare of the children. However, the intervention is optional. So if a family says, "Thank you very much for knocking on my door, children's social care. However, I'm not bothered, or I don't want your help," then there's not a great deal children's social care can do about it. Intervention is optional. Information can be requested, as I've mentioned, from agencies, but agencies may turn around and say, "Children's social care, we're not giving you that information because the parent hasn't consented." End of job. However, section 47 referrals to children's social care when a child is in need of protection. As mentioned, the child is at risk of significant harm, and that children's social care has a duty to investigate, and this may be jointly with police, it may be jointly with health. If a child is at risk of significant harm and say sexual abuse or physical abuse has been perpetrated, Then there's also crime, so that's why I've mentioned it may be jointly with police. Any intervention under Section 47 from Children's Social Care is compulsory, as is a strategy meeting. Now, a strategy meeting is a multi-agency meeting which occurs following any Section 47 referral to Children's Social Care, and it takes into account the information from all universal agencies, be that health, police, education, social care, children's centre, domestic violence advocates. It will take into account all information, and it will determine whether the professionals around the table believe that that child is at risk of significant harm, whether they're at immediate risk of significant harm, whether there's ongoing risk of significant harm, or actually that there's no risk of significant harm. Now, this information can be shared and can be requested by Children's Social Care from all the different agencies, and it doesn't require parental consent. Now, it's quite self-explanatory, that, isn't it, in that an abusing parent is not going to agree to information being shared. So if you have a male who's sexually abusing a child, they're not going to say, yeah, go ahead, Children's Social Care, go on and gather as much information as you can. They're usually going to refuse, and that's why in Section 47 inquiries, information can be requested without consent. Now, when you've sent in your referral to Children's Social Care, so be that electronically or by telephone, that referral is screened by a social worker and a social care manager, and within one working day, so within 24 hours, there needs to be an outcome to that referral. Excuse me. That could be that there's no further action at this stage, that the information that's presented doesn't meet statutory social care intervention, that it could be level 1 on the continuum of need, or level 2, which could include a signposting to other agencies or services. So say, for example, a parent requests that the school nurse makes a referral to Children's Social Care because they're struggling with parenting. It may be that following the referral that we can signpost that parent to the local children's centre who will be able to support more appropriately. It may be following the outcome of the referral that we provide services. This is particularly relevant with children in need or children with disabilities, where a referral may be made to the local authority for equipment, say, and it may be that we provide such equipment. It may be that an outcome of the referral is that we're going to undertake an assessment of needs, and that's within a stated timescale, and we'll discuss that in a moment. But the assessment of needs is usually a child and family assessment, and it's a big assessment which includes information from all agencies. So where the referral may have come from health, it will ensure that it includes the information from health, but also potentially from school, from community services also. A further outcome of the referral, and again this is for the children that are considered in need at significant risk and immediate need of protection, could be emergency action to protect a child. So that's where Children's Social Care will seek emergency legal advice or seek cooperation with police for emergency action. And we'll consider these children under Section 47 as mentioned, whereby a strategy discussion or meeting will be held. But if a child's at immediate risk of harm, please don't delay the referral. Make sure you speak with your designated child protection officer within your agency and make sure that that referral is made to Children's Social Care as soon as possible. Now, one of my pet gripes, particularly when working out of hours, is when school potentially a child will go into school 9 o'clock covered in bruises. School will potentially ring the designated safeguarding officer at lunchtime. They'll have a chat, they'll gather some information, and at 5 o'clock, once they've let the child go home, they make a referral to Children's Social Care. Now, if a child presents in a health setting whereby there's immediate concerns of any form of abuse, please immediately speak with your designated safeguarding professional and immediately make a referral to Children's Social Care. It is okay to write on the form or via the telephone if asked a question that you don't know, because I do realise that when people make a referral to the local authority that I work, the call handlers go through a series of questions, and if you're unsure of that particular question or you don't have all the information, please just say I don't know, but I feel that this child's at immediate risk, and I'll follow up with any further information. As mentioned, one of the outcomes from the referral may be that the Children's Social Care undertake a child and family assessment. Now, I've highlighted on the screen what the assessment looks like and what is taken into account. Now, this assessment framework is taken from the Framework for Assessment of Children and Their Families, and again, if you Google that, it will come up and take you through the assessing protocol that's undertaken by Children's Social Care. But you can see that the child safeguarding and promoting welfare is made from a triangle, and the triangle is parental capacity, child's developmental needs, and family environmental factors. So taking into account child's developmental needs, you can see down the left-hand side of the triangle, you have health, you have education, emotional and behavioural development, identity, family and social relationships, social presentation, and self-care skills. The assessment will take into account each of those facets and ensure that either the family is supported in any areas, or that if a concern is identified, that it's tackled. Down the right hand side we have parenting capacity, and we've got basic care, so that's the parent being able to provide the child with basic care, basic physical and emotional care, that they can ensure safety, that they offer emotional warmth, stimulation, guidance and boundaries, and stability. Down the bottom of the triangle we have family environmental factors, so this takes into account community resources available to the family, their social integration, their income, because obviously abuse can be tied to low socio-economic groups, although it can occur across the spectrum. Neglect seems to be linked with poverty, although again can be across the spectrum of more socio-economic groups. We look at employment, the parents or caregivers, housing, which is a massive problem in the UK, the wider family. So although we might have deficits in the parents and their ability to provide basic care, we might have a grandma that actually steps in most nights. We'll also look at family history and functioning, and although it's not a determinant that parental abuse in their own childhood is going to mean they're going to abuse their own children, it's important that we get an understanding of the parents' childhood and how they view childhood and how they view parenting in order for us to undertake an assessment. Following this assessment, which can take up to 35 days to complete and may involve us contacting all the universal agencies, professionals, etc., the outcomes could be no further action. Actually, in that 35 days, the initial concern that was brought to children's social care attention has self-resolved. So, for example, that might be an abusing partner leaving the property, going into custody, for example. Or it could be that the initial concern that was reported actually wasn't a concern and wasn't evident in the local authorities' involvement. It could be the case that following assessment that we signpost to other agencies or services, and I've put de-escalation to team around the family there. So it may be the case that following the assessment we've actually identified there's a health need, but that health need could be met by the school nurse. We could provide services, so it may be the case that the family maybe a family who are not from the UK, have no recourse to public funds, but actually we're going to provide a service under child in need and provide monies towards housing or care. It may be the case that we de-escalate to a child in need plan, whereby the regular visits are undertaken to the home as well as regular child in need planning meetings. It may be the case, and this is for the most serious categories of abuse, that we initiate a child protection conference. Now, initial child protection conference involves a coordination of all universal agencies, health, school, etc., to meet around the table. There's normally, in all cases, there's an independent reviewing officer who is independent from the local authority. He will chair the child protection conference, and it may be the case that the professionals around the table state that they believe that the child should be subject to a child protection plan. Now, that can be under the categories of abuse, neglect, sexual abuse, physical abuse. emotional abuse, and that this will be decided at the initial child protection conference. Now, a child subject to a child protection plan is subject to regular home visits and is subject to core group meetings and review. Now, for the more serious concerns where we believe that a child is at immediate significant risk, it may be the case that the local authority undertake what's called a legal gateway meeting, which may initiate the public law outline. Now, I'm not going into much detail here. However, just to say that the public law outline is the start of the local authority, so Children's Social Care, beginning to consider making an application to the court. So a legal gateway meeting will be held. Solicitors for the local authority will attend, solicitors for parents, and a decision will be taken on a review period or whether actually the local authority needs to make an immediate application to the court. A further outcome may be that the local authority initiate legal proceedings, and this can include the local authority making an application to the court for immediate removal of the children. Again, I haven't got the time here today to talk about the different care orders. That may be something that happens in the future, but the local authority has at its disposal a number of powers that and applications they can make to the court, such as emergency protection orders, interim care orders, for removal from the family home if they believe that the risk is that significant and cannot be managed within the community. So I've discussed there some of the outcomes following a referral to Children's Social Care, and it may be the case that following your referral that you've made, be it by telephone, be it electronically, be it by fax, however, that you may receive a letter saying that we're not taking further action, or you may be invited to a child protection conference. But it's really important that, just to round up and discuss, that you have a professional responsibility. It's not just social workers that can recognise risk or children in need of support. It's often those people that are first going into the home. So that might be paramedics, it might be health visiting service, it may be the out-of-hours GP. In my experience, we've received referrals from debt collectors, from landlords. It's from people who are in the home and are able to witness firsthand what is happening in the home. Again, as a professional, it's really important that we recognise the needs of parents. Some parents are just struggling and who may need a bit of extra help bringing up their children. It's, as my mum always says to me, when you were born, they didn't give me an instruction manual. Well, some parents just need some instruction, not in a coercive way or anything like that, but they just need support and some help, and that's where our local children's centres, a Sure Start health visiting service example, can step in. It's important that as a professional we recognise abuse or the risk of abuse to an unborn child, particularly where parents are misusing substances, may have mental health difficulties, may be in abusive relationships. So it's important that if you recognise that a female who's pregnant is living in a situation whereby there's a risk to the abuse of the unborn child, that a referral is made to Children's Social Care. Now, it may be that your referral is made early in the pregnancy, that the parent may be only 4 weeks, and you may be told to re-refer when there's a viable pregnancy. So it's important that if you are asked to re-refer, that you do re-refer to Children's Social Care if you believe there's any risk to the unborn. We need to understand also that the perpetrators of abuse aren't just adults, parents or carers, that it can actually be the children themselves, and we need to understand the risk, and it's our professional responsibility to understand the risk of children who harm others. It's our professional responsibility that we have access, and we have in our iPhones or contacts or whatever, the details for our agency's designated safeguarding professional. We should know who that is. We should know how to get child protection advice whenever we need it. What I would say is, if you cannot get hold of your agency's designated safeguarding lead, that you contact Children's Social Care. You may not always be put through to a social worker, however, just should you need to speak to a social worker, one is available 24/7 throughout most local authorities to speak to if you have initial child protection concerns. Ideally, it is important that you go through your agency's designated safeguarding lead who will explain your agency's referral process. It's really important that as a professional that we promote a culture of listening to children and seeking their views and being age appropriate with children. It's often easy to get into the habit, and it's hard for social workers, and I know it is from experience of managing social workers, that they don't get tied up in actually what's happening for the parent, that actually the benefits haven't been paid, or the landlord's down the throat, they're broken up with a boyfriend, or they're having a poor relationship with their mother, or they're having this problem with a neighbour, or the dog won't stop barking, whatever. We need to make sure that we promote the culture of actually listening to the child. How is all this impacting on the child? It's important that we try and tackle this with the parents, but our primary concern is the impact on the child. We need to ensure that we respond sensitively to the needs of children from a range of different racial, cultural, religious, or linguistic backgrounds. Sometimes it's extremely easy to get westernized into how we believe children should be brought up, when in fact different cultures, different religions may have different rationale or cultures or understandings of how children should be brought up. We need to make sure we work with families and need to make sure that they're bringing their children up within the law, within what's legal, with what's in best, and the understanding of best practice for children. But we also need to understand that from a racial and cultural background, it may be completely different to how we ourselves bring up our own children. We need to understand the roles and responsibilities of other departments, and this is particularly relevant, and it's by no means agency bashing here, but social workers are not going to solve the problem in isolation. A social worker visiting a child on a child protection plan once a month, and maybe in a child protection review conference maybe every 6 months, is not going to solve the problem, the family's problems in isolation. There's no magic wand. Social workers certainly don't carry magic wands, contrary to popular belief. They need the support of other agencies, other departments, but also social care needs your support as a professional. And instead of getting into long protracted arguments with a social worker about what you should or believe should be happening or not happening, it's easy to forget that social workers, like anyone else, are working with a framework. And yes, you may have a child in front of you who needs removing from the family home, and they need removing immediately. But a social worker potentially can't make that happen overnight or within a few hours. That there's a process, that there's legislation, that there's a statutory framework that social care have to follow. So sometimes, and I understand why it happens, social workers, well, other professionals, can become increasingly frustrated with social workers and how long it's taking them. However, we don't just go around putting children into the back of our cars and taking them off without the relevant legal process in place. So it's about understanding different roles and responsibilities in the same way that social workers shouldn't expect other professionals to step out the realm of their expertise. Now, lots of expert witnesses in court are being severely admonished for stepping out of their professional expertise. We need to know what we know. We need to understand the roles and responsibilities of other departments and other professionals, and not expect them to overstep the mark or act outside of their statutory policy guidance or legislation. It's really important as professionals that we contribute to inquiries, that we don't sit back, that we don't ignore the email, ignore the telephone call. If a social worker is ringing for information and advice, that we try and offer that as timely as possible, that we contribute to the inquiries, that we don't withhold information just because we can't be bothered or we haven't had time to do it, that we liaise closely with other professionals internally in regards to sharing information, that we work collaboratively. that we assess the needs of the children, the capacity of parents to meet their needs. So that this is what we're doing, we're assessing. We're looking at what is the problem and how it can be fixed, and we're going to plan and respond appropriately to meet those needs. It's really important as well, if you're going to go to a child protection conference or a family group conference, that you actually contribute. If you've got something to say, don't sit there and not contribute. Make sure that your voice, your opinion, your professional opinion is accounted for. It's really important as a universal professional that you contribute to the support and planning for children who have suffered or are likely to suffer significant harm. And you help ensure that they've got access to support and services around them. So if we identify a need for children, and we as professionals identify that X will help them, but actually X doesn't exist, that it's important that we go back to our commissioners or our child protection leads and say, this would really help this person, but this service doesn't exist, this is a gap in service. Or if we identify that a certain service will assist and we don't know whether it exists or not, that we make inquiries to find out whether it's available and how we gain access to it. And unfortunately, that will likely require another referral to the agency. But if you've made one succinct referral to children's social care, then surely the information from that referral could be a referral to referring agencies and universal services. It's our professional responsibility to contribute actively to the child protection plan. As I've said, social workers in isolation are not going to safeguard children. It's a universal response. It's working collaboratively. And we need to ensure that as part of safeguarding children that we provide promotional and preventative support, and we look at proactive work with children and families. And finally, as a professional, you may be asked to contribute to serious case reviews and their implementation. Now, serious case reviews are held where there's been serious failings or believed or perceived serious failings where a child may have died as a result of inaction by agencies. As I mentioned earlier within this presentation, the go-to guidance for professionals would be the Working Together to Safeguard Children document there. I've uploaded a link. You may need to type that in if it doesn't take you directly to the link. But I know it's been quite quick this evening. I don't want to waste much of your precious time for those that are listening at home, outside of the office environment. I've not been able to mention everything that occurs. However, I hope tonight to give you a brief understanding of what occurs when you make a referral to children's social care. That contrary, again, to popular belief, we're not all bead-wearing, cake-eating, tea-guzzling professionals, that we are actively managing risk and relying on you as other universal professionals to help us support that risk. If you do have any questions, if there is a question mark box at the top, you can make them now and leave the webinar open for 5 minutes or so, just in case there are any questions. But thank you for your time tonight, and hopefully that will assist you. If in doubt, go to your designated safeguarding lead and get advice. Thank you. Okay, we've had a question through from Rosanna, and it was, what practices should paramedics use when they're confronted with a child who's been burnt by submersion into boiling water? Now, submersion obviously comes under the category of physical abuse. Submersion can often be seen in the absence of splash marks. So if a child was themselves to jump into boiling water, you'd likely see splash marks up their legs. If a child's submerged into water, there'll be a linear line of burn or scalding to the child. My advice would be, obviously, tend to the health needs first, get straight to the accident and emergency department, and make a referral to children's social care under section 47. If you believe a child's been burnt by submersion, in my opinion, it would contribute to its significant harm, it would need to be investigated under Section 47 of the Children Act, whereby a strategy discussion would need to be undertaken, and likely police inquiries in respect of how a child comes to be submerged in boiling water. I hope that answers your question, but as I said, tend to the health needs and make sure that there are referrals made to children's social care as soon as possible. I'm hoping I haven't sent you all to sleep this evening. No worries, Rosanna, you're more than welcome. I think the easiest thing to do where you have any concern about a child is seek advice. As I keep mentioning, designated safeguarding leads. Children's social care, particularly in the area that I work, has contact numbers out of hours, within hours, where you'll be able to speak with a social worker if your concern is such that there's safeguarding concerns. So please just give them a ring. If in doubt, check it out. There's a question here from Yasmin. I'm a DSO for adults in a psychiatric hospital I work in. On frequent occasions, we have patients who wish their children to visit. Sometimes there are concerns about mental state impact on children. What is your views? Yasmin, I'm also an approved mental health professional, approved under the Mental Health Act. So coming from a child protection background and being approved under the Mental Health Act gives me some idea of what's going on. This could apply also to children visiting parents who are in custody, who are in prison, and the impact on children. I think it's a greater impact the child not seeing a parent. Now, going back to feeling and understanding how a child views the world, for suddenly a parent to disappear off the face of the earth and either being in a psychiatric ward or in prison or in custody is distressing. Not seeing that parent for a number of months is extremely distressing. I think my opinion would be it's dependent on the age of a child, what they'd be able to understand by visiting that environment, and preparation. So by preparation, I mean preparing a child for a visit. If the child's of an age of understanding, so let's take, for example, a 12-year-old child visiting a parent on a psychiatric ward, it'd be really easy to sit down and talk with that child and prepare that child for a visit, so that we wouldn't necessarily say no visits whatsoever, that we'd say that actually preparation needs to be undertaken, what the ward will look like, what the type of things they may see on the ward, why mum or parent is in hospital. So preparing the child for the actual visit, noises they may hear, alarms that may go off, the smell of the ward, the ward environment, whether they'd feel comfortable. But for me, I think it's more important that a child sees the parent, see that they're alive, that they haven't abandoned them, that they are being taken care of, that somebody has got their best interests at heart. What's particularly distressing, for what I found particularly distressing, and this is a personal opinion, is that when working in child protection and I would remove children from parents' care, potentially I'd be driving along the motorway to a foster carer's home, and more often than not, the child of a talking age would say, will you make sure my mum's alright? So regardless of the concern for themselves, they were always concerned about the parent. So I think it's really important that they have contact. And as I say, I think preparation is the key, and understanding a child's age development and how it will impact on them. I hope that answers it, Yasmin. Okay, we've got a question here from Roz. With the increasing cuts to local authority budgets, do you feel this is having an impact to referring, accessing appropriate services to be able to carry out the recommendations on the plan? Definitely. I don't need to tell any professional that we're in an age of austerity, that there is cuts to all services across the board, that there's increasing cuts to children's social care, to education, to health, which is having an impact across the board, which potentially is going to and time will demonstrate. Unfortunately, we're needing to have that time to demonstrate increasing impact on the local authority and the threshold for intervention. Now, it's quite high. When I talk to the social workers that have been social workers significantly longer than me and maybe edging towards retirement, they'll talk about times when they worked in communities with families, that they had time to spend with families, that they would visit their houses, they'd have a cup of tea, they'd take the child to school. If the child refused to get out of bed, they'd be shaking the bed to get them out. That isn't the reality of social work at present. With increasing cuts, means we're stretched further, means that we're limited in being able to respond appropriately, carry out any recommendations from the plan, and subsequently children end up with being on child protection plans potentially longer than they should be. They potentially end up remaining in home environments longer than they should. In respect of immediate protection, the court brought out not so long ago, I think it was last year now, a plan that all care proceedings would be undertaken within 26 weeks. So that's from start to finish, that the local authority would make an application to the court and it'd be dealt with within 26 weeks. Now, in itself, it sounds a long time, but when you need to demonstrate that you've assessed the family to death, that you've provided every form of support you possibly can, that you've looked at every possible care option, that you've looked at every possible family member that could care for these children if they can't stay within their homes, it's not a great deal of time. It would be a great deal of time if that was the only case on your caseload, but you may have 27, 30, up to 40 cases, which are all vying for your time, and it's unfortunately, and it feels that way in social work, that it's whoever's shouting loudest or whoever is demonstrating the most need at that time gets your attention. In respect of other agencies referring, it's sometimes quite easy to refer to children's social care, and by that I mean, and I say this to staff that I work with and social workers that I supervise, when did their problem become our problem? So, for example, and again, this is just an example, and I don't want to agency bash because, as I've said throughout this presentation, that the social care is reliant on other agencies. They are not in themselves miracle workers, although some might like to be. But we're reliant on other agencies, and again, not to agency bash, but things like referrals to children's social care, whereby, I don't know, a parent has rang 111 and 111 have given advice to go to the GP, but actually parent said, no, I'll go tomorrow. So then 111 make a referral to children's social care, and often we wonder why. When did 111's problem become child protection? Because a parent actually decided they weren't going to take their 2-year-old child to the out-of-hours walking centre in the middle of the city centre because they may or may not have chicken pox. Again, it's about understanding the professional role. What's a social worker going to do? A social worker can't force a parent to go to or follow the advice of 111. So it's very easy sometimes to make a referral, a non-considered referral, a referral just to get the hot potato or the concern away from your agency, because we're all stretched for time. It's sometimes easier to, if we're worried about a child, rather than working directly with them, doing further exploration, looking at appropriate services, to make a referral to children's social care. They'll sort it out. It's not always a case we're as stretched as any service, and the same again, we rely, and I keep saying this, we rely on other professionals. The police, 2 years ago, the local authority I worked for particularly underestimated the value of the police support, and police support was abused, and we were requesting welfare visits at 2 o'clock in the morning by police officers, and we took the mic up, and that resource suddenly got quick onto it, and rightly so. So now it's a case of us understanding professional responsibilities and making sure that we're not, because of cuts, because we're stretched, that we're relying on other services to step out of their professional remit. But budget cuts and cuts to local authority budget is going to have an impact on referring, but I think it's going to have an impact across all professions. I hope that's answered it, not quite succinctly, but there we go. Okay, we've got a question from Rosanna. Have you found in recent years an increase in depression in children and teens due to social media and the general impression children have on themselves compared to the late 90s, 2000s, or is it now that it's broadcasted? Really worrying. Bad time to be a teen. It's hateful. It's horrible. I know there's a Facebook link going around at the minute which says, thank God Facebook wasn't available when we were teenagers. And it is the case. The difference now with Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat and the like is that children don't get time to turn off. So whereas us as children may have had one set of friends in school and a different set of friends at home that lived in the area, etc., now children who are tormented in school can be tormented at home as well, and they don't switch off the phone, and it's secretive, and these online bullies are able to get away with it because nobody's going to admit that actually they've only got one like on the picture. And that's what it's all about now at the minute. It appears that children are vying for attention through social media, that if they don't receive 1,000 likes, and my stepdaughter's been as guilty as this as anyone, it's like for a like. And I asked her one day, what the hell is like for a like? And it's like, well, if they're like me, I like them. It's like, this is crazy. You're bargaining for appreciation, for attention. But yeah, to return to your question, I think the social media in general is putting unrealistic expectations on our children, that not content with magazines that used to show us when we were children what the ideal body would look like, or the ideal male physique, or the ideal home, the ideal car, the best job, what have you. We're now bombarded by the ideal world through the Facebook advertising, through LinkedIn, through Twitter. There's no escape from it. Even when you turn off your settings, that you don't actually want to see the latest slimming pills, or that you're not interested in lifestyle advertisements, you're still bombarded with it. So I think it is reported more. There's more research now into how online social media impacts upon children's development, particularly with the view that they have of themselves, and often the negative view that they have of themselves. But it may be that it is a case that we're just more intelligent now. We're researching further into it. But honestly, for me, you can't get away from social media, and that's the biggest problem, that actually children can't turn off. They can't just be children. Can't just go and play in the mud and potentially have an accidental injury. They're subjected to all kinds of crap, really. I think it'd be ideal, but I'd never try it myself because I couldn't be. I don't think I could manage the backlash. But turning off Wi-Fi now and again, which is again to comment on my stepdaughter, would be like cutting off the electricity, or cutting off food, and potentially in the future the next category of abuse, and this is being flippant, will be withholding Wi-Fi from a child. Potentially in the future, this is what we may see. But online bullying and social representations of children on social media, it's definitely A, broadcast more, and B, contributing to the low self-esteem and depression in children, without a shadow of a doubt. I hope I answered that question. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very conscious that I've been talking now for nearly an hour and a half, so I am going to leave you now. If you do have any questions or inquiries that I haven't answered this evening, please do email cbdme.com through their support, and I'll be able to pick them up. They'll be forwarded to myself, and I'll be able, hopefully, to answer them for you. Thank you again for taking time, and I know people are extremely busy and have lives, for listening to me this evening. and promise that you will receive a certificate which will be sent automatically to you. Members of CPD Me will also, that certificate will automatically be placed in their portfolio. Thank you again very much for listening to me, and again, have a good evening.